Hey, welcome back. I'm glad you're here tonight. Really, I am, because where we're about to go isn't exactly the coziest place you could choose to drift off, but maybe that's the charm of it. So before we slip too deep, go on, lower the lights a bit more, fluff up that pillow, maybe tug your blanket around your shoulders. Feel that soft weight pressing you down, safe, warm. Now, close your eyes if you want, or just let them go heavy. Tonight, I want to take you somewhere most people would rather forget. Back to a world where sleep was never truly peaceful. A place where every creak in the floorboards, every faint scratch in the dark, could mean an uninvited guest sharing your bed. Just picture it centuries ago in a medieval village that smells faintly of wood smoke and wet earth. You've got nothing but straw beneath you, a thin blanket, and maybe, if you're lucky, a few warm bodies huddled close to keep the chill away. But you're never really alone, not with tiny claws tapping along the beams above your head. I wonder, have you ever felt something brush past your leg at night? That split-second spark of panic before you tell yourself it was just a blanket? Imagine that feeling every single dusk. Imagine drifting off to the steady breathing of your family and the not-so-steady scampering of whiskered shadows at your feet. But don't worry, we're only visitors tonight. No claws or tails will slip under your blanket, I promise. For now, just listen to the crackle of the hearth, the wind pushing against that loose wooden shutter, and the quiet, constant presence of creatures who made every medieval home just a little bit more alive. So settle in. Tonight, the rats can't get you. They'll only scratch at the edge of your dreams while we wander back in time, together. Picture this. You're lying on your back, eyes fluttering open just enough to see the wooden beams above you, dark with smoke stains, maybe a cobweb dangling in the corner if you tilt your head just right. The fire in the small hearth has burned down to a handful of orange embers, their glow barely strong enough to push back the shadows that gather in the corners of the room. It's not really a room, though, not in the way we think of rooms now. This is your entire world, wrapped up in 4 rough stone walls and a thatched roof that leaks when it rains. The floor is hard-packed earth, with scattered straw to soften the feel against your elbows if you roll over. No wooden floorboards here, just the chill of the ground creeping up through your thin bedding, reminding you it's winter again. In this one-room home, you're not alone. There's your mother, snoring softly beside you, her arm draped protectively across the youngest child. There's your father on the other side, curled tight to keep the heat in. Maybe a brother and sister, shoulder to shoulder, their breath puffing out like little clouds in the icy air. You all sleep together because, well, there's nowhere else to go. No spare bedroom down the hall, no private little sanctuary. The only doors here are the front door and a small cupboard nailed in the wall that might hold a chunk of stale bread, a wedge of cheese if you're lucky. And that cupboard, it's already been visited by tiny paws. There's a draft tonight, whistling through a crack in the wooden door. It rattles the latch gently, just enough to make you wonder if it might blow open before dawn. Somewhere above you, in the thatch and the beams, you hear it, a faint pattering, like a handful of pebbles rolling across a roof. But it's not pebbles, it's claws. Claws belonging to the little brown guests who come and go as they please, squeezing through holes in the walls, slipping down rafters like tightrope walkers in the dark. Imagine rolling over and tucking your blanket closer. Your hand brushes the edge of the straw mattress, if you can even call it that. It's not much more than a sack stuffed with straw or dried rushes, maybe even old rags if the harvest was lean. The straw shifts under your touch, rustling softly. If you press your ear close, you might hear other movements inside, the scurry of smaller things. Lice, fleas, the restless rustle of life that shares your bed whether you invite it or not. And here's the funny thing. No one really complains, not in the way we might today. Sure, There's a muttered curse if a rat gets too bold and nibbles at the bread left on the hearthstone, or if it dares to run across a sleeping child's face. But what can you do? This is how it's always been. The priest down the lane probably sleeps with a share of rats too, despite the crucifix nailed above his straw bed. Even the baker, with his warm loaves and sweet rolls, finds rodent droppings sprinkled across his pantry shelves every morning. For a moment, listen to the little sounds: the drip of water in a bucket by the door, the wheeze of someone's breath, the soft scratching under the straw. It's a strange sort of lullaby, but somehow it works. The family drifts back to sleep, exhausted from a day of labor in the fields or mending clothes by the fire. Their dreams mix with the quiet scurry of tails and paws, weaving a night that never truly feels empty. And if you shift a bit, careful now, mind the splinters in that rough blanket edge. You might glimpse a pair of tiny eyes watching you from the shadows. Curious, bold, waiting for you to drift off again before they creep closer. But don't worry, not tonight. Tonight, they're only here in our minds, gentle reminders that once upon a time, sleep was never just yours alone. Next, we'll lean in a little closer to the scents that fill these nights. Because in this cramped little world, every breath carried stories, and every story carried the scent of something you'd probably rather forget. But don't worry, I'll be right here to guide you through it. Now breathe in for a moment. Go on, pretend you're taking in the night air of that small, single-room home. Not fresh, not crisp like the countryside we like to imagine in fairy tales. This air is thick, stale in places, smoky in others. There's a dampness that clings to your nostrils, a weight that sits in the back of your throat. It's the kind of air that tells you exactly where you are and who's been here before you. First, there's the smoke. The hearth has been burning low for hours now. The last log's nothing but glowing lumps and ash. All day long, the smoke gathered near the ceiling beams, weaving its way into the thatch, the wooden walls, the hair of everyone inside. When you inhale, you taste it, bitter and sharp, a reminder that this fire is the only thing standing between your family and the bite of winter's cold. Next, there's the musk of bodies, human, yes, but also more than human. Picture 6 or 7 people who haven't bathed in days, maybe weeks. Washing was a luxury, especially when water had to be hauled in buckets from the town well and heated over that same little fire that already struggles to warm the room. So the scent of unwashed skin becomes part of the home itself. Sweat soaked into rough linen tunics, hair matted with oil, feet crusted with dry earth. It's a living scent, warm and sour at the same time. And here's where it gets more interesting: the smell of the straw under your blanket. It's fresh enough when it's first laid down, a bit sweet and grassy. But after weeks of sleep and spilled soup and the occasional accident, from a child or a pet or some other guest, it turns musty. It holds on to every drop of moisture, growing damp in the corners where the cold creeps in. Press your nose to it, and you might catch the sharp ammonia tang where the family's youngest forgot to run to the chamber pot in the night. No blame, just another layer of the scent tapestry. But wait, there's a note you might not expect. Grain, barley or oats or rye, tucked away in a corner sack for tomorrow's porridge. If you listen closely, you'll hear the quiet gnawing of tiny teeth working through the rough cloth. Rats love that smell too, the dusty promise of a meal. And with them come the hints of their own presence. Droppings hidden under straw, a stale, greasy odor where they nest in the shadows. It's a smell that sticks to the corners of the room, even when the wind sneaks in through the door and tries to carry it away. And then the people try to mask it in their own small ways. A handful of herbs hanging above the hearth. Rosemary, sage, maybe a twist of lavender if you're lucky or near a monastery garden. Little bundles that dry and crumble, releasing faint, sharp perfumes when someone brushes past. They're more hope than help, really, a thin defense against the constant tide of less pleasant aromas. Imagine lying there under your blanket, the scratchy wool pulled up to your nose. Your mother's hair tickles your cheek, warm and faintly sour. The baby on the other side stirs, letting out a tiny sigh that smells of milk gone a little bad. And beneath it all, always, always the earthy, oily scent of fur. The rats don't knock. They don't wait for an invitation. They come because this smell is a beacon, a promise that crumbs will fall and bodies will sleep too deeply to notice a visitor brushing past their feet. So breathe it in, all of it. The wood smoke, the sweat, the straw, the herbs that can't quite do their job. Let it settle over you like a threadbare quilt. Because in this medieval world, the night isn't just darkness. It's a stew of scents that fill your lungs, cling to your hair, and follow you into your dreams. And when you drift off, half listening to the patter of paws on the beams, you know you'll wake up with these smells still wrapped around you. A reminder that your bed is never just yours alone. Next, we'll lean closer to that warmth you're so grateful for. The way bodies pressed together fought the cold, but invited so much more to the bed than just family. Just keep breathing. I'll be right here. Next, let's feel the warmth. It's easy to think that medieval nights were nothing but bitter drafts and icy floors. But here's the truth. Sometimes the cold brought people closer than any fire ever could. Picture yourself burrowed into that lumpy straw bed again, the rough blanket barely wide enough to tuck under your feet. It's deep winter now, the kind that slides in under doors and seeps through stone walls no matter how tightly you hang your rush mat against the wind. So you do what every villager does. You huddle. Not just for company, but for survival. Your mother presses in on one side, her back warm against yours, the weight of her arm flung over you like an extra layer of cloth. A younger sibling is curled into the crook of your knees, their breath damp and soft against your skin. There's no modesty here, no separate beds, no privacy to speak of, only the honest closeness of shared body heat, and the quiet comfort of hearing the people you love breathing beside you through the night. But it's not just the warmth of family you feel. Beneath the blanket, the straw shifts and creaks, rustling as tiny lives stir awake. Picture a rat nosing its way toward your feet, drawn to that soft pocket of heat you've worked so hard to keep in. It creeps close enough that the tip of its tail brushes your ankle, a cold, twitching line of skin against skin. You flinch, but not enough to wake anyone else. What would be the point? The rat isn't here to hurt you. It wants what you want, a patch of warmth on a bitter night. Maybe you shove your foot deeper under your mother's hip, try to wedge yourself into a pocket where the straw is still dry, the blanket still holds some heat. But you know, and they know, that there's always room for one more warm body, even if it's covered in fur and squeaks when you shift. And outside the blanket, the cold is a living thing. If you stick an arm out, just for a second, the air bites at your skin, sharp and damp. Frost creeps up the stone walls at night, turning the inside of the tiny window to glass. In a corner by the hearth, a bucket of water might freeze over while you sleep, the ice rim cracking when the fire sighs its last smoky breath. Listen closely, you can almost hear the sounds of people shifting in their sleep. A child whimpers, dreaming of warmth that doesn't slip away. Someone coughs, the sound echoing off the stones, mixing with the scratch of tiny claws. Sometimes you hear the pop of a burning ember and hope it'll hold out till morning. And here's a small comfort, if you can call it that. Everyone knows this is how it is. The noblewoman in her drafty stone castle sleeps with the same chill under her velvet quilts. The traveling merchant curls up under his cart, his horses flank for warmth. And in the hovels along the muddy street, dozens of families huddle the same way you do, layered like spoons in a drawer, waiting for the sun to come up and the frost to break. If you peek out from under the blanket, careful not to let in too much cold. You might spot the family cat curled near the hearth. Even she knows the value of a warm belly. Her ears twitch at the sound of a rat nearby, but she's too sleepy to care. Maybe tomorrow she'll earn her keep again. Tonight, the rats get their share of the warmth, too. So you squeeze your eyes shut, burrow deeper, and try to forget the cold that creeps toward your shoulders. You focus instead on the soft weight of your brother's foot pressed against yours, the warm hush of your mother's breathing, the occasional tickle of a whiskered snout that makes you pull the blanket tighter. In this world, warmth is precious. You share it with everyone, family, fleas, rats, because you have no choice. And tomorrow, when you wake and see your breath in the air, you'll do it all again. You'll light the fire, gather the straw, patch up the holes in the walls, and when the sun goes down, you'll press close to the people you love. And maybe, just maybe, you'll get used to the tiny guests who slip under the covers to steal a little bit of warmth for themselves. Next, let's scratch a little deeper into what lurked beneath that straw, rustling and wriggling in the darkness. Because sometimes it wasn't just rats you felt moving down there. Ready? I'll be right here with you. Next, let's go lower. Not up into the beams or over to the hearth, but right under your blanket, under the scratchy linen shift you wear to sleep, down to the place where your skin meets the straw. Because that's where the real bedtime company lived, the kind you couldn't always see, but you felt. Oh, you felt them. Imagine it now. You're half awake, cheek pressed against a lumpy pillow, maybe just a bundle of old cloth or a sack stuffed with straw that pokes through and pricks your skin if you shift too much. You try to find a soft spot, but every time you settle, there's something there, a sharp stem, a splinter of hay, and sometimes a tickle that's not straw at all. Picture your hands slipping under the blanket in the dark, scratching at your ribs, your collarbone, the bend of your knee. The itch is constant, sometimes sharp and sudden, other times a dull, crawling prickle that dances just out of reach. And you know why, don't you? Because that straw mattress, that nest you share with your whole family, it's never just straw. It's alive in its own way. Listen to the tiny sounds it makes. The faint, rhythmic rustle as a flea leaps from one warm body to the next. The nearly inaudible squeak of a louse nestled in the seams of your nightshirt. Maybe, if you're unlucky, the tiny scratch of bedbugs, each one no bigger than a grain of pepper, but bold enough to crawl across your skin when the room goes dark. And when you shift, just to scratch that place behind your knee, the straw shifts too. It creaks and sighs like a living thing, releasing puffs of that earthy, slightly sour smell. If you press your palm flat against the bedding, you might feel a lump beneath your hand. Is it just a twist of straw? Or the small, warm body of a mouse who's burrowed in for the night, hidden from the cat by the same blanket that tries and fails to hide you from the cold? It's a strange sort of intimacy, this scratchy underworld that you share with things you never invited. You might even hear your brother groan in his sleep, his fingers scratching at a red welt on his neck. Maybe your mother stirs, muttering a prayer that tomorrow the town's washerwoman can spare enough hot water to boil the bedclothes, to chase out the fleas. But you both know the truth. By next week, they'll be back. They always come back. Sometimes you dream about the itch. In your half-sleep, you imagine tiny legs tiptoeing up your spine, brushing the hairs at the nape of your neck. You dream of scratching and scratching until you wake, your fingernails full of little crescents of skin. And then, in that quiet moment before you drift off again, you feel the straw shift beneath you, a sigh, a rustle, and you wonder what else might be nesting there, pressed close against your warmth. And it's not just the tiny creatures, either. The straw itself carries secrets. Think of where it comes from, cut from the fields, bundled and dragged through muddy lanes, laid down fresh once, maybe twice a year if your family can spare the time. Each stalk carries bits of soil, seeds, the scent of the barn. Sometimes it brings bigger guests, beetles, mites, maybe a half-sleepy spider who wakes when your body heat spreads across its new home. And yet, people made peace with it. What choice did they have? A lumpy straw mattress was better than the bare ground. So they scratched, they sighed, they muttered curses at the fleas and the rats and the restless scuttling just beneath their skin, and then they rolled over and tried to forget about it. Because the dawn always came, and the dawn meant chores and bread to bake and water to haul, and there was no time left to think about what might be waiting under the blankets when night fell again. So now, lying here together in this imagined bed, feel that itch for just a moment, that slow, ghostly crawl across your scalp, the little nip at your ankle, and then pull your blanket tighter. Scratch if you must, but don't worry too much. Tonight, they're just shadows in our minds. No claws, no fleas, no restless straw, just the hush of sleep, the warmth of your own heartbeat, and the distant whisper of the past reminding you how crowded a bed could really be. Next, we'll listen for the household guest nobody really wanted, the furry one you could hear but never quite catch. Stay close. The scratching's only just begun. Next, let's listen for that one guest who never knocked, never paid rent, but always seemed to find a way inside. Every medieval home, from the smallest peasant's hovel to the grandest merchant's townhouse, had at least one, usually more. You might hear them first before you see them. A quick shuffle in the corner by the hearth, a faint tapping along the beams overhead. Picture yourself lying there under your scratchy blanket, half awake, the itch beneath the straw still clinging to your skin. The fire has shrunk to a dull orange glow. Shadows grow thick and soft in every corner. You hear your father snoring, your brother muttering in his sleep, but beneath that, another sound. A tiny rustle, a squeak maybe, the hush of claws over wood. There it is again, near the pantry this time. The sack of barley tied shut just a few hours ago. But string is no match for sharp teeth. And rats, well, they're patient. Clever too. They wait until you're drifting in that sweet space between waking and dreaming. And that's when they make their move. Imagine a rat's point of view for a moment. Humor me. It slips through a gap by the door, belly close to the floor, whiskers brushing the cold stone. It pauses at the straw bed, sniffs the sleeping feet poking out, then scampers toward the pantry. It knows exactly where to go. It's been here before. A dozen nights, 100 nights, generations of rats teaching their pups the secret routes. Your mother knows they're there. Everyone does. Maybe she's left a wooden trap by the hearth. Just a block of wood with a hunk of stale cheese. A primitive snare that might catch one if you're lucky. But for every one that snaps its neck in the night, 10 more wait in the walls. And it's not just food they want. Warmth, crumbs, a little drip of leftover broth. Some families, if you can believe it, even leave scraps out on purpose. A twisted sort of truce. Better to keep the rats fed and out of the bed than let them get desperate and bolder. Because bold rats don't stop at the pantry. Bold rats cross the bed. Bold rats nibble at sleeping children's ears. You've heard the stories, haven't you? The baby who woke screaming with a bloody toe? The old man who swore he felt tiny teeth testing his fingers for softness? Stories passed around the village in the cold light of morning, when the hearth is roaring again and courage grows a little stronger. But by night, the scratching returns. There's always one more rat. You roll onto your side, tug the blanket higher, try to block out the sound. Maybe you hear the family cat shift by the fire, a lazy flick of her tail, eyes cracking open just enough to watch the shadows move. She's a good mouser when she wants to be. but she's no match for a full nest. The rats know her game by now. They're quick. They slip through the walls, the floorboards, the holes in the roof beams. Some nights, if you're very still, you might see one on the edge of the straw bed. Its eyes catch the glow of the embers, tiny black beads that glisten like beads of oil. Its nose twitches, weighing its chances. Does it dare cross the threshold from floor to blanket? Some do. A quick dart across your toes, a tickle of fur on your ankle. You flinch, but it's gone before you can shout. And in the morning, you'll find the evidence. A half-chewed crust near the hearth, a little trail of droppings under the bench. Maybe the barley sack torn open, grain scattered like dirty snowflakes on the floor. Your mother sighs, mutters another prayer, sets another trap, and you all pretend, during the busy hours of the day, that you're in charge, that the house is yours. But come nightfall, the rats remind you. This home belongs to them, too. You share the warmth, the scraps, the straw, whether you like it or not. And maybe you make your peace with it, because what choice do you have? You keep your toes tucked deep under the blanket, your fingers curled tight against your chest. You listen to the scratching behind the walls like a lullaby you never asked for. And when sleep finally pulls you under, you tell yourself they're just hungry, just cold, just creatures like you, looking for a place to curl up and dream away the dark. Maybe you even hope they dream too, in some tiny, whiskered way. But don't worry. Tonight, they're just shadows at the edge of your thoughts. Soft, harmless, a reminder of the kind of guests you never really get to uninvite. Next, we'll slip up higher to the beams above. Because while you sleep, the rats run highways in the dark, paths that trace your every dream. Ready? Keep breathing. I'm right here. Next, let your mind drift upward, just above your head, past the scratchy blanket tucked under your chin, past the straw mattress that rustles every time you turn, past the sleepy breaths of your family, all pressed close together. Look up. Do you see them? Those wooden beams stretching across the low ceiling, blackened with smoke from 100 fires, rough and splintered where the thatch roof meets the cold night air. Those beams, they're not just for holding up the roof. No, they're secret roads, little highways for creatures that never rest when you do. Picture it now. A rat small and nimble, nose twitching in the draft that drifts through a crack in the thatch. It slips from rafter to rafter, tail trailing like a thin rope in the shadows. Each beam is a path. Each crossbeam a shortcut. Each loose patch of thatch an off-ramp into someone's pantry or bedroom or bed. Imagine lying there, eyes cracked open in the half-dark, tracing the faint outlines above you, the way the flicker of the dying hearth dances on the beams. You hear it then, that tiny, telltale tap of claws on wood. Tap, tap, pause. A little squeak, maybe. Then the scamper starts again, quick and light, like someone drumming tiny fingers overhead. You hold your breath for a moment, half hoping it'll stop. But it never does. And here's the thing, it's not just one. No medieval home ever held just one rat. Where there's one brave enough to walk the beams, there's a whole family waiting in the walls. Pups hidden in cozy nests of chewed cloth and straw scraps, tucked up in the warmest corners. When you hear the footsteps above you, you're really hearing a parade. Generations of tiny paws tracing the same paths night after night, as if they own the place. And in a way, they do. The family cat lifts her head by the hearth. Her eyes catch the light, 2 green coins glowing in the dark. She hears the tap-tap too, but she doesn't move yet. Maybe she's learned. Chasing a rat on the ground is one thing, but chasing a rat on the beams? Well, that's a fool's errand. The rats know just how high they can run to be safe from teeth and claws. Sometimes, if you're unlucky, one might lose its footing. A sudden slip, a tiny thud, a rat landing in the straw pile next to your feet. You wake with a start, your heart knocking in your chest, your eyes searching the shadows for the skittering shape that disappears before you can even sit up. You'll tell your mother in the morning, and she'll just nod, lips tight, eyes already scanning the beams for holes that need patching, as if stuffing rags into the cracks will keep them out. These beams, these unseen highways, carry secrets too. They're not just for rats. They carry the echoes of your family's life. The smoke that curls up from the hearth each night, staining the wood darker every year. The soot that drifts down like a whisper when a rat's tail flicks it loose. The scent of dinners long eaten, roast onions, stale ale, bits of cheese left out too long, trapped up there like a pantry in the rafters. And it's not only your home. Every neighbor's cottage, every village barn, every timbered attic is laced with these hidden roads. Some say the rats know the way from house to house, slipping out one thatch roof and in through another. A whole city of whiskers and tails and tiny feet weaving through the town above the sleeping heads of peasants and lords alike. So, you pull your blanket closer. You tell yourself the beams will hold, that nothing bigger than a rat could come tumbling down on you. And you close your eyes, pretending you don't hear the soft thud of something being dragged across the rafters. Maybe a stolen scrap of bread, maybe a crust tucked away for later. You dream of silence, but overhead, the unseen highways hum with life. And here's the curious thing. Come dawn, you'll wake to a quiet ceiling, the scampering gone, the beams still and innocent as if nothing ever happened. You'll step out into the yard, squint at the gray sky, and you might even forget they were there at all. But when night falls again, the highways come alive. The little feet return, tracing their ancient routes in the shadows above your dreams. Next, we'll slip back down to the floor where a pair of glowing eyes keeps watch. The village cat on her nightly patrol, the last line of defense against an army that never sleeps for long. Ready? Keep that blanket close. I'll stay right here with you. Next, let's slip back down from those beams, away from the tiny claws tracing their invisible roads above your dreams. Down here, by the flickering glow of the hearth's last embers, someone else is awake. A sliver of green catches the light. The half-open eye of the village cat, that quiet guardian every family hopes will keep the scurrying at bay. Picture her now, curled tight on a woven mat near the warm hearthstone, her tail wrapped around her paws, ears twitching every so often at the patter overhead. Her fur is rough from nights spent prowling muddy alleys and cold barn floors. But here, in this small home, she's royalty in her own right. She's earned her keep 100 times over, and everyone knows it. When she lifts her head, the room seems to hush for a moment. She sniffs the air, catches a whiff of movement in the shadows near the pantry, and lets out a slow, rumbling sigh. Not yet, she decides. Not worth it yet. Cats know when to wait. Now, imagine you're half awake on your straw bed, eyes squinting in the gloom. You spot her there, her eyes twin moons in the dark, and you feel a tiny flicker of comfort. Maybe the scratching will stop tonight. Maybe the household guessed nobody will think twice before testing those teeth. But deep down you know the truth. Even the best mouser can't catch them all. Some cats, they say, were so prized that villages shared them. Families might pass a good ratter from one house to the next. A furry mercenary moving down the lane, hunting her fill before curling up in a fresh bed by a new fire. It was practical, really. One cat to guard a dozen grain sacks. One set of claws to keep the worst of the night's tiny thieves in check. But the rats are clever, too. They learn the cat's patterns, the lazy circle she makes around the hearth before she settles down again. They know she can't be everywhere at once. Not when the beams above are so easy to climb, or the cracks in the walls so small and dark. So they scurry and squeak and test the edges of her kingdom while she sleeps, hoping to slip past her watch. Picture the cat now, stretching out one paw, claws flexing in the firelight. She stands, tail high, ears rotating to catch a faint squeal near the cupboard. You hear her pads whisper across the floor, a soft pat-pat on the packed earth, the rustle of straw as she steps near your bed. You hold your breath, waiting for the pounce. But sometimes she changes her mind. She pauses, sniffs at a spot where the rat was a moment ago, then flicks her tail, unimpressed. She'll catch it tomorrow. Maybe. There's something comforting in that lazy confidence, isn't there? The way she owns the night, but only on her terms. Maybe she curls up at your feet now, a warm weight that pins the blanket in place, her fur brushing against your cold toes. You dare not move too much. You wouldn't want to wake her, wouldn't want her to stalk off and leave you undefended. For a moment, the scratching fades. The beams fall quiet. The pantry seems safe enough, and you close your eyes, imagining her on patrol long after you're lost to dreams. A tiny lion pacing the kingdom of your one-room home, guarding you from all the things that scurry and squeak in the dark. Of course, in the morning, the truth greets you plainly enough. The grain sack still bears tiny chew holes. The half-eaten crust of bread lies forgotten near the hearth. The cat stretches and yawns as if to say, "What did you expect?" Even the best hunter must sleep, and the rats never really mind waiting. But for now, in this drifting space between waking and dreaming, you can believe in her. The village cat on her night shift, your soft-footed sentinel in a world that never truly sleeps. Next, we'll wander outside these four walls, just for a moment, down two neighboring streets where life and filth and rats mingled side by side. Because not every bed was equal, but every street carried the same scratching secrets. Ready? Take a breath. We'll walk it together. Next, let's pull on a ragged cloak, slip your feet into rough leather boots, if you're lucky enough to have any, and step outside for a moment. Careful now, the wooden latch on that crooked door creaks like an old man's knees, announcing you to the night. But don't worry, the village is asleep, or trying to be. We're just passing through. Picture it now, two streets, side by side, running like veins through the heart of a medieval town. On one, a narrow lane where the poorest live. Tiny cottages leaning into each other as if they'd collapse without their neighbors to prop them up. Mud clings to every stone. A thin stream of foul water trickles down the middle, carrying scraps and peelings and worse toward the town ditch. The other street is only a few steps away, but it might as well be a world apart. Here, the merchant houses stand taller, their timber frames freshly whitewashed if the family's done well that year. Their doors are thicker, their windows, such as they are, have shutters that close tight against the cold. You might even catch a whiff of something sweet, spiced bread cooling on a shelf, salted fish packed away for tomorrow's trade. But here's the curious part. The rats don't care which street is which. To them, a home is a home, a pantry is a promise. They slip through the gaps between these two worlds as easily as you walk from shadow to lantern glow. Imagine walking this lane in the hush of early dawn, just before the sun peaks over the thatch roofs. On the poor street, you pass by doorways where scraps of straw spill out, families pressed so tight inside that there's barely space to stretch a leg. If you look down, do you see it? Tiny paw prints in the mud, a trail leading from the broken crates by the tannery straight to the gap beneath someone's door. A mangy cat darts past you, its ribs showing through its fur. It stops, ears perked, then loses interest. There's too much prey, too many places to hide. The cat knows it can't win this war alone. Now cross over just a few steps, really, to the better street. The ground is cobbled here, though rain and time have pried the stones loose in places. There's a faint glow spilling from the cracks in a shutter. Inside, a merchant's wife checks her store of barley one last time before the house wakes. She knows the truth, even if she doesn't say it out loud. A stone house keeps the wind out better than a mud cottage does, but it doesn't keep the rats away. Look closer. The beam over the door. See that? A gnawed corner, worn smooth by generations of tiny feet climbing up to squeeze through the thatch, or the joints where the timber frame meets the wall. Behind that door, a pantry waits, sacks tied with cord, salted meats hanging from hooks in the rafters. The merchant's family might pride themselves on their well-stocked shelves, but every crumb is an invitation. Every dark corner is safe harbor for sharp teeth and twitching whiskers. Sometimes, if you stood here long enough, in that hour when the village still sleeps, but the rats have grown bold, you'd see them cross from one street to the other. A bold little shadow slipping through a gap in the fence, belly close to the cold ground. A twitch of movement by the butcher's stall, where scraps of offal are piled for the pigs, but tempt 100 tiny thieves first. And when dawn comes, both streets wake to the same story. The poor family opens their door, shakes out their straw mattress, grumbles at the droppings near the hearth. The merchant's wife sweeps up the scattered grains on her polished floor, scolds the house cat for sleeping too soundly, mutters a prayer that the plague won't find its way in again. Different prayers, same fear. It's funny, isn't it? How the rats cared nothing for status or wealth. How they blur the lines we humans drew so carefully. To them, your walls were just another nest. Your bed just another warm patch of straw. Rich or poor, you were never alone. So stand here with me, in this thin slice of night, where two streets meet under a sky just starting to lighten at the edges. Listen to the hush of the sleeping town, the faint drip of water from an open barrel, the whisper of paws scurrying from alley to attic. Next, we'll slip back inside, to the comfort of a supper by the hearth. Because even the smallest bite you save for tomorrow was a banquet waiting for those uninvited guests. Little thieves feasting while you dreamed. Ready? I'll be here when you wake. Next, let's duck back inside, away from the muddy lane and the echo of tiny paws pattering between streets. Pull the door closed behind you. Never mind that crooked latch, it never really keeps anything out. In here, the hearth glows softly, its last embers cradling the scent of the day's final meal. Picture it, a low wooden table, battered at the edges, its legs uneven so it rocks with every elbow leaned upon it. Around it, the family settles close, shoulders brushing, knees bumping under threadbare blankets pulled tight to keep the night's chill at bay. There's a pot, blackened by years of hanging above the fire, bubbling with the remnants of a thin stew. Turnips, maybe an onion if they're lucky, a shred of pork bone lending its flavor before it's gnawed down to marrow. Beside the pot, a round of coarse bread, hard around the crust but still soft enough at the center to soak up the broth. A wedge of cheese, its edges blooming with blue veins that no one dares cut away. Food is too precious for squeamishness now. Everyone eats in silence. The only sound's a scrape of spoons against wooden bowls, the soft huff of breath when the broth is too hot. But here's the part no one says out loud. They're never really the only ones at the table. Every drop spilled, every crumb fallen from a distracted hand is an open invitation. They know it, even if they pretend not to. So look around, just beyond the warm glow of the hearth, into the corners where the shadows bunch thick and dark. Listen closely. Hear that faint rustle, the tiniest click of claws on stone. The rats are waiting. They're always waiting. One sits at the edge of the straw bed, eyes bright pinpricks in the dark. Another hides behind the woodpile, whiskers trembling at the scent of fresh crumbs. And when the last mouthful is swallowed and the spoons scraped clean, the real feast begins. Not for the family, but for their hidden guests. The children drift to sleep first, heads lolling on folded arms or tucked against a mother's side. The father sighs, pokes at the dying coals with a stick, maybe mutters a half-hearted curse at the shapes he knows are gathering just out of reach. Then he sets aside the pot, maybe with a scrap of bread crust still stuck to its rim. He'll scold himself in the morning for being careless, for leaving behind just enough to tempt him closer. But tonight, there's nothing left to do but sleep. Picture the moment the house falls silent. The last whisper fades, the last log on the fire shifts and sends a puff of sparks drifting up to the beams. The cat lifts her head, one ear flicking at the faint squeal near the pantry. But she's tired too. She curls her tail tighter around her nose, lets the night take over. Now, imagine the rats creeping out, tiny kings of this midnight feast. One scales the table leg, a nimble acrobat tracing a path across the rough boards. It sniffs at the bowl, nose shiny, whiskers quivering as it tastes the oily sheen left behind. Another darts to the floor, sniffing up breadcrumbs so small they'd be invisible to you or me, but to him, they're worth the risk. They do it carefully, these hidden guests, testing the shadows, pausing at every sudden creak of the roof beams, every sigh from the sleeping child on the bed. Sometimes they squabble, a squeak, a sharp nip, a tiny flurry of fur and tail. But mostly they're quiet, polite in their own way, each one taking just enough to fill its belly before slipping back through the crack behind the cupboard. Meanwhile, the family sleeps on, caught in dreams that never truly drift far from their waking fears. Sickness, famine, the harsh knock of a tax collector at the door. But beneath those worries runs this small, constant thread. The knowledge that even what little they have is never quite safe. Not when the scurrying comes at dusk, not when the tiny jaws never rest. And maybe there's a strange comfort in that, too. The rats have always been here. Long before you were born, they watched your grandparents' hands break bread at this same table. Long after you're gone, they'll be here still, tracing the same paths, chewing the same corners, slipping from rafter to rafter as if the world belongs to them alone. So for now, breathe in the scent of the hearth smoke, the tang of old cheese, the ghost of warm broth still drifting in the air. Let the scratching fade into the hush of sleep, a lullaby of tiny paws and whiskers, a reminder that every meal, no matter how meager, is a feast for someone in the shadows. Next, we'll drift into the darkest nights of all, when the scratching meant more than stolen crumbs, when a single bite could carry nightmares far worse than the itch beneath your straw bed. Stay close. We're about to step into the plague years together. I'm right here with you. Next, let's let the warmth of that tiny hearth fade, just for a moment. Feel the chill push its way under the door, slipping around the blanket you pull tighter to your chin. Because now we're stepping into the blackest chapter of this midnight tale. The time when that faint scratching in the beams and walls could mean far more than a chewed crust or a stolen scrap of barley. Imagine it now. The year is some year you wouldn't want to remember. Some year when the plague carts roll through muddy streets at dawn, wheels groaning under the weight of bodies wrapped in coarse cloth. The air itself tastes heavy, coppery, laced with the sour bite of sickness that clings to everything it touches. Doors close, the hair of a child pressed too close to a coughing mother. And there always are the rats, scurrying from cottage to cottage, from the grand stone houses of the wealthiest merchants to the crooked huts that barely stand upright along the town ditch. They're not just thieves anymore. They're messengers of death, tiny furred shadows that slip under doors and into beds, ferrying something you can't see but can feel the moment your skin prickles with fever. Picture a family like any other. You might even see your imagined self among them. curled up under a thin blanket, trying not to shiver when a night's cough takes hold. A mother dips a rag into a bowl of water, presses it to a burning forehead, whispers a prayer she's whispered so many times that the words have lost their shape. She listens to the soft scratch of claws in the walls, but she's too tired to curse them now. The rats have won this round. She knows it. Because it wasn't really the rats themselves, was it? It was their unwelcome passengers. Fleas so tiny you might not notice one hopping across your collarbone until it sinks its teeth into you. One bite, one speck of blood, and that was enough. That scratch at midnight could carry the memory of the last house the rat visited. The neighbor's bed where a child lies still now, eyes glassy, breath gone. Outside, the town crier stumbles through muddy streets at dawn, calling out the newest names. Bring out your dead. The words drift through shutter cracks, carried by the same breeze that rattles the thatch roof and sends the rats scurrying to safer corners. Safe for them, never for you. There's irony here, isn't there? The very warmth you needed to survive those long, bitter winters, that precious nest of straw and bodies pressed together, became the perfect breeding ground for what would kill you. Fleas nestling in your blankets, hiding in the folds of your tunic, waiting until you're deep in sleep before they taste you again. And the rats, always the rats, scurrying along the beams, down the walls, carrying those tiny hitchhikers from house to house like dark, whiskered postmen. Imagine the rumors that spread faster than the sickness itself. People blamed the air, the sins of their neighbors, the alignment of the stars. They burned sweet herbs in their hearths, stuffed dried lavender into the cracks in the walls, pressed garlic to their door frames. Some trapped the rats and threw them into the river, a dozen, 100, but for every one that drowned, 2 more crept back through the floorboards before nightfall. Even the village cats suffered, overfed, sometimes blamed themselves, or worse, feared and killed by frightened people who thought they were witches' familiars. With fewer cats, the rats ran freer than ever. You can almost hear it. The beams above, a riot of tiny claws as the unseen highways carry the plague from the butcher's stall to the baker's attic, from the baker's attic to your bed. But what choice did you have? You still had to sleep, didn't you? You still had to pull the blanket around your shoulders, close your eyes, and pray you'd wake up to another dawn. Maybe you lay there, half listening to the scurrying above, telling yourself that tomorrow you'd patch the cracks, boil the bedding, sprinkle more sage in the corners. Maybe tomorrow the scratching would stop. It never really did. Long after the worst was over, when the cart stopped rolling through the lanes and the crier's voice went quiet for a while, the scratching remained. The rats stayed. The fleas burrowed back into the straw. The itch beneath your skin returned like an old friend you couldn't quite hate. Because even plague could pass, but the rats were forever. So breathe now, soft and slow. Let the weight of this dark memory settle like smoke in an old chimney. The scratching in the beams is just a story now, just a whisper in your ear as you drift deeper into sleep. Next, we'll brush up close to the smallest culprits of all. Not the rats themselves, but the tiny hitchhikers they carried. Fleas biting in the midnight hush, reminding you that sometimes it was the smallest things that could do the worst harm. I'll be here when you're ready to scratch that itch. Next, let's leave the creaking beams and the scratching tails for a moment and lean in closer, so close that you can almost feel it. The smallest pinch in the hush of midnight. A bite so tiny it could be your imagination until it isn't. Picture it now. You're half asleep on that straw bed again, the blanket scratchy against your chin, the warmth of your mother's back pressed into yours. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters. The hearth is burned down to its last stubborn glow. You've almost drifted off, your thoughts somewhere far from the creaking walls, when there it is. That sharp, needling prick at your ankle. Your toes twitch. Maybe you shift, scratching lazily at the spot under the blanket, hoping it was nothing but the brush of straw. But you know better. You've felt this before, every night, really, though you never say it aloud. It's the midnight bite of the flea, the smallest tormentor in this crowded little nest you call a bed. Picture a single flea, its tiny body flattened like a black seed, legs springy, built to leap from blanket to skin to hair and back again. You can't catch it? Not really. You might slap your arm, scratch your calf raw, rub your feet together under the covers until you drift off again, but it'll wait. It always waits. Imagine the little lives they lead, tucked into the seams of your only shirt, clinging to the frayed hem of your mother's shawl, burrowing deep into the straw you laid down fresh in the autumn, but haven't had the means to change since. Every warm body in the room is a meal. A restless toddler's plump wrist. Your father's ankle where his trousers ride up while he sleeps curled in the corner. The cat. Even fleas don't mind if you have fur or a threadbare blanket. There's a quiet cruelty to it, isn't there? The way you invite them in with your own breath, your warmth, your blood. They make themselves a home without ever announcing their arrival. You might spot one when you wash your shirt in the village stream. A tiny that scurries away from the water, finding refuge in the folds while your knuckles turn raw on the washboard. But you never get them all. And in these plague years, or any years, really, they're more than just an itch. One tiny bite could carry fever, swelling, the kind of sickness that sets your skin burning so hot your mother leaves the door open at night just to let in the winter air. A fever that makes the scurrying rat seem like the least of your worries. But for now, the bite is only an irritation, a small reminder that you're not alone under that blanket. Feel it now, that gentle creep up your shin, the pinprick at the back of your knee. Your fingers scratch without thinking, nails tracing the bite until it swells under your touch. And when you drift back into that half dream, you imagine the fleas hopping between the sleeping bodies beside you, testing who's warmest, whose blood is sweetest. In the gloom, your brother shifts and mutters. He scratches too, his small hand pawing a line of bites that dots his belly like a rash. He doesn't wake fully, no one does. The itch is as much a part of sleep as the creak of the beams or the hush of the wind outside. Sometimes you wonder if they dream too, these tiny, jumping creatures. Do they dream of warm beds and fresh blood? Do they huddle together in the straw when the hearth grows cold, waiting for the next pulse to settle near enough to taste? Or are they mindless, the itch-made flesh, a nuisance too small to hate but too close to forget? By day, you pretend they don't exist. You sweep out the straw, you boil your tunic in a pot if you have enough firewood to spare. Your mother hangs blankets on a line and beats them with a stick, cursing when she sees the specks hopping away like black pepper sprinkled on snow. But by dusk, they're back, tucked into the same seams, tracing the warmth of your body as you slip under the covers, convinced for a moment that tonight you'll sleep free of their bite. Of course, you never do. They're the cost of sharing your bed with warmth, with family, with the straw that keeps your bones off the frozen earth. Their small price, you tell yourself, at least until the fever comes. And even then, you'd rather scratch at your skin than shiver alone in the dark. So tonight, feel it just for a moment, that soft, creeping itch at the back of your knee, the tiny flick of movement at your elbow, the little reminder that you're never quite alone. Then breathe it out. Let fade. Pull your blanket tighter around your shoulders and listen instead to the hush of the wind and the quiet breathing all around you. Next, we'll drift back up from a straw and look again at the people themselves, the ones who lay side by side through it all. Because in this tiny world of scratching claws and midnight bites, the bed was never yours alone. It was the family's kingdom, and you all learned to share it, whether you wanted to or not. Ready? I'll be right here, scratching at history with you. Next, let your mind pull back just a little away from the itch beneath your shirt, the tiny legs that hop and crawl when you're too tired to care. Picture the whole bed now, not just your scratchy patch of straw, but every warm, breathing body pressed shoulder to shoulder in the hush of the medieval night. Imagine this bed, if you can even call it that. More flattened nest of rushes, old cloth, straw trampled down over the same spot year after year. A hollow in the corner of the room, tucked away from the door where the drafts slide in. It's where your family gathers every dusk, each person folding themselves in a place like spoons in a battered drawer. There's your mother first, always nearest the wall. Maybe she's got the baby curled against her chest, a tiny bundle wrapped tight in a scrap of linen that smells faintly of milk turned sour. Her hand drifts in her sleep, fingers brushing the baby's cheek, pushing back a curl of damp hair. Next to her, maybe your sister, her knees drawn up under her chin, toes tucked under your thigh for warmth. Your father claims the outside edge, the human shield between the rest of you and the cold that seeps through the crooked door. And there you are, wedged in that thin strip between your brother's elbow and your mother's hip. Try to find just enough space to straighten your legs without nudging someone awake. When one person rolls over, the whole bed shifts like a slow, living tide. Limbs tangle, feet press against backs, shoulders knock gently in the dark. But that warmth, oh, it's precious. There's a comfort in the weight of it, the steady rise and fall of lungs all around you. Your brother's foot digs into your calf, but you don't mind. Not really. Better that than a night alone on the cold floor where your breath would frost the air above you like a ghost. Yet even here, in this nest of bodies, you're never alone in the way you wish you could be. Because between each breath, each soft snore, there's another presence that slips into the cracks. Picture it. The family drifts off. The baby's sigh fades into the gentle chorus of the night. And from the shadows, the first rat creeps near. It pauses at the edge of the straw, nose quivering at the scent of leftover broth clinging to your sleeve. It knows you won't stir. Not for this. So it presses closer, its tiny feet making the straw rustle just so. Not enough to wake your mother, but enough for you to open your eyes for a heartbeat and feel that cold tickle along your ankle. Do you kick it away? Maybe. But what good does it do? Another will come, slipping around your brother's curled legs, brushing past your sister's bare foot. Even the baby, if you can bear to picture it, a rat testing the softness of a pink heel with its wet nose before darting off again. And then there are the fleas, the lice that nestle in your hair. The straw itself, damp and musty where someone spilled broth or a chamber pot leaked days ago. You could boil every scrap of cloth you own if you had enough firewood to waste, but by next dusk, they'd return. Sometimes you dream of a bed that's only yours. A bed that's soft and dry, where no one jabs you in the ribs when they roll over, where no tail brushes your leg, no flea nips at your skin in the hush before dawn. You might have heard rumors in church of the Lord's manor up the hill, feather beds, they say, piled high with linens clean enough to smell sweet, pillows stuffed with goose down. But even then, who's to say the rats don't slip through the tapestries when the servants snore? Who's to say the fleas care whether you wear silk or rags? So you make peace with it. The closeness, the scratching, the warmth and the weight of your family's limbs anchoring you to this world when the cold tries to steal you away. Maybe you even whisper a prayer. Not for a night free of fleas or rats, because that seems too much to ask, but just for another night together. Another dawn when you'll wake to the creak of the door, the hiss of the hearth catching flame again. The same voices grumbling about who hogged the blanket, who snored the loudest. It's strange, isn't it? How a bed that's never truly yours becomes the thing you miss when you're away. The scratchy straw, the soft warmth, the crowded hush of all those breathing bodies pressed close to yours. So tonight, Settle back into that nest in your mind. Feel the rough blanket scratch your chin, your brother's heel press into your shin. Listen for the tiny feet rustling at the edge of the straw, the uninvited guest you've learned to share your sleep with. And know that, for all its fleas and fur, this bed that's never just yours, keeps the cold at bay and the night just gentle enough to let you dream. Next, we'll wake with the sun and feel the cold air push us back into the day. We'll rise with the peasants at dawn, brushing off the straw, shaking free the hush of the night, and pretending the scratching never happened at all. Ready? Take a breath. I'll be right here when you open your eyes. Next, let the night slip from your shoulders. The scratching in the beams, the fleas in the seams, the rustle of tiny feet beneath the straw. They never truly vanish, but for now, they fade into the hush before dawn. Because dawn in a peasant's home doesn't come with soft rays of golden light and birdsong sweet as in fairy tales. No, it comes with the first chill that bites at your nose when the hearth's last embers die to ash. Picture this. You stir awake before your eyes open fully, roused by a sound you know better than your own heartbeat. The rooster crowing down the lane, voice cracked from too many seasons perched on the same fence post. You shift your leg and feel the stiff prickle of straw stuck to your skin. Your mother shifts too, her breath catching in a low sigh. She's already awake, even if she pretends not to be. Outside, the village stirs with you. A door bangs shut in the distance, the heavy thud echoing down the alley between cottages. A cart rattles over frozen ruts, iron rims squealing. You hear the low murmur of someone cursing the cold, the soft bray of a donkey that dreams of warm hay it may never get. Inside, the room feels smaller than it did in the hush of night, cramped with the smell of bodies that never fully faded, sweat and wood smoke, sour milk and damp wool. You tug your blanket aside, and the cold rushes in, biting at your feet. You wrinkle your nose. The straw smells stronger now that it's been pressed down by so many backs and elbows through the night. Musty, a little sharp, the scent of earth and something that feels like old secrets you'd rather not name. Your brother groans, rolling over, his hair stuck up like dry grass. He scratches lazily at a line of flea bites marching along his neck. Your sister rubs her eyes, squinting at the dim light pushing through the cracks in the shutter. Somewhere beneath the blanket, you feel that scratch at your ankle again. The last reminder that the fleas are always waiting, whether you rise or sleep. And then, the ritual begins. Your mother sits up first, pulling her shawl around her shoulders, hair wild from sleep, but hands already moving. She brushes straw from the baby's tunic, tugs the straw mattress flat, pats down the corners where it's thinned to nothing. She clucks her tongue when she sees the droppings near the hearth, a neat line of black beads, a trail the rats left behind while you dreamed of quieter things. She mutters about the traps again. Maybe she'll bait one with a crust too stale for even your brother to chew. Maybe the village cat will earn her keep tonight, or maybe she'll sleep through it all again, tail flicking as the rats run highways above her head. You stand, stretching your arms over your head, bones cracking like twigs. Your feet sink into the packed earth floor, cold as river stones in winter. You glance at the door, at the slim line of dawn creeping through the gap beneath it. Another day to haul water from the well, to patch the roof if the thaw has softened the thatch, to gather more straw if you're lucky enough to find it dry. In the better houses, the same ritual plays out, just with thicker walls and bigger hearths. But they too sweep up the same droppings. They too toss out scraps for the cat to catch. They pull open their pantry and find tiny teeth marks on a salted ham they'd planned to save for the feast day. No one escapes it, not really. Outside, you breathe in the air, crisp, bracing the bite of wood smoke and dung and distant baking bread. You rub your arms, wishing the sun would hurry up. The village unfolds around you, roofs steaming as frost melts under the first touch of light. You pass a neighbor tipping out a bucket of soiled straw. Fleas and all, scattered to the ditch where they'll dry for an hour before the next family tucks it right back inside. Yet somehow, this life feels normal. Ordinary. You chat about the rats and the beams as if they were bad neighbors instead of vermin. You joke about the flea bites like they're the price you pay for warmth. You plan the evening meal, knowing a crumb will feed you now, and the scratching guests later. It's an unspoken pact, isn't it? You get to live, to huddle together under rough wool and old straw, to wake to the rooster's cracked crow, and they get to share it all one stolen bite at a time. So you lift your head, squint at the pale dawn sky, and rub the last dream of the night from your eyes. The scratching will come again tonight. The fleas will find you the moment you sink back into the straw. But for now, the village hums awake, and the plague of tiny claws and tiny teeth slips out of mind, until dusk calls it back. Next, we'll slip behind the weary footsteps of the rat catchers themselves. Those half-mythical souls who claim to keep the scratching at bay, armed with traps, tricks, and cats with sharper claws than the ones purring by your hearth. Ready? We'll follow their muddy boots down the alley together. I'm right here when you are. Next, follow me down a narrow lane, past the half-frozen puddles that catch the dawn light like broken glass. Feel the wind snake through your thin tunic as you pull your shawl closer around your shoulders. Up ahead, you spot him, boots caked in mud, a rough woolen cap pulled low, a sack slung over one shoulder that shifts with a weight that never stays still for long. This is the rat catcher. You've heard of him, maybe even glimpsed him once at the market square, standing there like a shadow at the edge of the stalls while the gossiping wives pretend not to stare. Some say he's part hero, part trickster, part fool. Others swear he's blessed or cursed by something older than the church, something that lets him follow the scratching into places no one else dares linger. Picture him now, leaning his net-handled stick against a cottage wall, kneeling by a tiny crack at the base of a timber frame. He's got a pouch of secrets tucked under his belt, a chunk of cheese that's grown so sharp it could raise the dead, a smear of salted fish gone slick with oil, bits of bacon rind filched from a butcher's bin. He knows how to tempt a rat better than anyone. In your town, he's not just a man with a trap. He's a storyteller too. Some nights, when the wind howls and the scratching in the beams sounds more like a storm than claws, the children gather near the hearth to whisper what they've heard. The rat catcher talks to them. They say, the rats. He asks nicely before he lays the snare. He sings a tune to lure them out, soft as a lullaby, until they follow him willingly, tiny kings bowing to their thief of a court jester. It's nonsense, of course, but in a world where fleas bring plague and rats chew through what little you own, you'll believe any story that promises hope. Watch him now as he works. He sets the trap just so, the snare looped with twine that looks too thin to hold, a chunk of stale bread tied at the center. He waits, still as an old post. He knows the moment they'll come. Dusk, always dusk, when the families huddle by the hearth and the scratching grows bold in the quiet corners. He'll catch 3 tonight, maybe 5 if the wind is right and the cats are lazy. And when he does, he'll march them to the edge of town in his burlap sack, the squirming weight shifting against his back as the moon peeks over the thatch roofs. Some he'll drown in the river, the cleanest death he can manage. Others he might kill with a quick crack against the barn wall, a mercy no one wants to think too hard about. But here's the curious part. For every rat he catches, 10 more slip away. They know him too. They watch from the beams and the tunnels beneath the street. They learn his scent, the creak of his boots, the clink of the old iron traps he can't afford to replace. Maybe that's why he keeps moving, never lingering too long in one village. Once the rats learn his tricks, they find new ways to slip the snare. Still, people pay him a few pennies here, a scrap of bread, a mug of thin ale at the tavern in thanks. Some offer a warm corner of straw for him to sleep on, though many won't risk sharing their fleas with a man who smells of rats. And always they hope that maybe this time he'll take the scratching with him when he goes. Not that he minds the scratching. Some nights he'll sit by the dying fire in a stranger's cottage, the burlap sack propped at his feet, tiny claws rasping softly inside. He'll close his eyes, listening like a man, comforted by the noise the rest of you dread. Maybe, in the dark, he whispers to them, tells them they're clever, tells them he'll come for their kin tomorrow. And tomorrow he will. He'll follow the trails you pretend not to see. Droppings in the pantry, knotholes in the grain sack, whiskers slipping under the hearthstones. He'll scatter his traps, hum his tunes, snap necks and drown bodies. But deep down, even he knows, the scratching never truly leaves. Not while the crumbs fall, not while the straw lies warm, not while the cats sleep too soundly by the fire. So next time you wake at midnight to that soft scurry in the walls, that faint tap-tap overhead, maybe you'll picture him out there somewhere. Boots squelching through muddy lanes, sack swinging at his back, eyes trained on the beams you're too tired to check. A lone figure hunting the little kings of the night. One snap, one trap, one whispered tune at a time. Next, we'll step outside those cottages again, into the heart of the village where the filth ran deep and the bells tolled loud, because the scratching in the walls was nothing compared to what skittered through the streets themselves. Ready? Let's walk together. I'll be here, following every echo of claws on cobblestone with you. Next, step out through the crooked door. Tug your shawl tight around your shoulders. Feel the first breath of dawn slip through the village like a cold sigh, lifting the smell of last night's fires, the sour tang of spilled ale, the sticky sweetness of rotting scraps piled in corners no broom ever quite reaches. Picture the street under your bare feet, not cobbled smooth like in some tidy town square, but rutted and muddy, its stone slick with filth that never truly dries. Every house has its own little pile of waste just outside the door. Potato peels, chicken bones sucked dry and tossed aside. Maybe a smear of last night's stew thickening into a crust in the gutter. Nothing is wasted for long, though. Not here. Listen, a door bangs open, and a pale-faced woman empties a bucket with a tired fling of her wrist. The water splashes into the narrow lane, washing streaks of who knows what toward the town ditch that gurgles like a foul little river along the main road. Bits of straw drift on its surface, spinning lazily as they float past clumps of better not to look too close. And in the middle of all that mess, the scratching lives on. See them now, bold as kings at dawn. A pair of rats scurrying along the edge of the gutter, bellies damp, for slicked down with filth. They pause to nose at a strip of gristle someone tossed aside, teeth clicking, tails whipping behind them. They don't care that you're standing there watching. They've learned you're no threat. Not here, not with your arms full of firewood or your eyes on the bell tower that rises above the rooftops like a stone finger pointing at your sins. Ah, the bells, listen for them. A low, echoing groan that shivers through the morning air. They toll for mass, for birth, for marriage, and too often for death. But even when they toll for the dead, the streets keep humming with life. Chickens peck at scraps beside the rats. Dogs nose through puddles for bones that might have a lick of marrow left. Children skip barefoot through the muck, feet tough as leather, toes caked with the same filth the rats dance through. And if you follow one narrow lane to the main square, you'll find a market waking up, baskets thumping on at trestles, barrels rolled out from cellars that smell of sour ale and mildew. The butchers toss out yesterday's scraps, snouts, hooves, bits too spoiled to sell, and the rats know the sound well. They gather in the shadows under the carts, waiting for the last human foot to step away before they swarm out, sleek and quick, their whiskers twitching in the cold. Meanwhile, the good folk of the village pull their cloaks tighter and mutter prayers to keep the sickness at bay. They know the scratching isn't just in the walls, it's under their feet, in the puddles that splash up on their hems, in the fleas that hitch a ride on the rats, the dogs, the cats, and then on them. They beat the church rugs and scrub the pews with holy water, but outside those thick stone walls, the scratching never stops. Some say the bells scare the vermin back to the shadows. But listen closely. Beneath that solemn toll, there's always a rustle, a squeak, the soft slip of claws over wet stones. The rats know the bells too. They know when the village gathers inside the chapel. All eyes upturned toward salvation, all ears deaf to the scratching that never really goes away. And the priests? Well, they preach of sin and penance, of the righteous path to heaven, but even they shake their robes out before they kneel at the altar. Fleas don't care for holiness. Neither do rats. The wealthiest merchant's wife might fancy her street cleaner than yours, her doorstep swept each morning by a boy with raw, chapped hands. But sweep all you like, the scratching finds its way back by dusk. So you step carefully, picking your way around a heap of cabbage leaves, a squashed apple trodden into the mud. You pull your cloak tighter, try not to breathe too deep when the wind shifts and brings the stench of the ditch to your nostrils. Overhead, the bells chime again, calling you to prayer, to work, to market, to birth, to burial. The village answers with bowed heads and muddy boots, while the rats answer with bold little noses sniffing out the next crumb, the next shadow, the next bed. It's a strange comfort, isn't it? To know that no matter how grand the church doors, how clean the stone floor inside, outside the world stays the same, cluttered, rank, teeming with life too small to banish, too quick to kill off for good. So when the bells fall silent, you'll go home. You'll step over the gutter's slow trickle, brush the filth from your shoes before you cross your threshold. And still, when night comes, you'll hear the scratching once more in the beams above your head. The church can toll all at once. The dirty streets hum with life that never truly bows its head. Next, let's hush these streets for a while and listen instead for voices we can't prove were ever real. The imagined murmurs of families, the secrets whispered in the dark when someone woke to the sound of scratching. Because sometimes it's the words we speak into the night that tell us how human we are, even when we share our beds with rats. Ready? I'll whisper it with you. Next, let the church bells fade behind you. Slip back through the crooked door, back into that cramped single-room home where the world shrinks down to one rough blanket, a sagging straw mattress, and the warmth of bodies pressed close. The door creaks shut, the latch rattles, as if it's enough to keep what waits outside at bay. But you and I know better. Picture this. The fire has burned down to its last ember, orange fading to the soft gray hush of ashes. The only light comes from the moon peeking through a gap in the shutter, a thin blade that cuts the dark into strips across the straw floor. You're lying on your side, cheek against the rough linen, the shape of your brother's back pressed firm into yours. You should be asleep. You want to be, but then you hear it. Scratch, scratch, a tiny scrabble near the wall where you keep the grain sack. You hold your breath. Maybe you squeeze your eyes shut, willing it to be nothing, just the wind tugging at the thatch. But there it is again, the whisper of claws, the squeak of something small testing the edge of your world. Your little sister shifts beside you, nose wrinkling as she wakes halfway. She turns, eyes wide and shiny in the moonlight, her whisper slipping between her teeth like a question she doesn't want to ask. Is it back? You nod because there's no point lying. The scratching has never really left. You feel her fingers curl around your sleeve, small and cold. Will it bite me? Her voice quivers like a candle about to go out. And you, half a child yourself, you lie. Softly, because that's what you do for the ones who need it most. No, it won't. Not if we stay very still. It just wants the crumbs, not us. A bedtime story wrapped in half-truths. You both know the stories. The baby down the lane who lost the tip of his ear one night when his mother slept too deeply. But you don't say that now. Your father shifts on the other side of the straw pile, muttering in his sleep. Maybe he hears it too, the little feet tapping at the edge of his dreams. He rolls over, blanket tugging with him, straw crackling like paper. The scratching stops for a heartbeat, then starts again, bold as ever. Sometimes your mother will wake too. She'll sigh, low and tired, words drifting from her lips like smoke. Hush now. They won't stay long if we've nothing to give. Then she says the same line she's always said, part curse, part prayer. Saint Gertrude, keep them to the walls and out of our beds. She's told you about Saint Gertrude, the so-called patron of cats and the women who love them, the one who's meant to guard the house from rodents. But in this room, under this thin roof, it feels like the rats never learn her name. Sometimes the imagined conversations are only in your head. You hear them when you're drifting. The scratch of claws becomes a question. What did you eat tonight? The squeak becomes an answer. Not enough. Never enough. You imagine them talking about you the same way you talk about them. Soft skin, warm breath. Leave the big ones alone. Take the scraps. Take the crumbs. Other nights, when the wind rattles the shutter and the rain leaks through the thatch, you dream of braver things to say. You whisper them into the straw so no one else will hear. Leave us be. Take what you want, but don't come closer. Don't brush my toes with your tail. Don't test my ear with your teeth. A child's bargain, offered to whiskered ghosts. And then, as if the rats hear you, they go quiet for a while. You close your eyes, imagining them slipping through holes behind the cupboard, under the hearth, back to the unseen tunnels that crisscross beneath the village like secret rivers. For a few moments, the house holds its breath with you. No squeaks, no claws, no soft scritch against the beams. Your sister's hand loosens on your sleeve. Her breathing evens out. The hush settles over the bed like another blanket, scratchy but warm. You think, for a heartbeat, that maybe tonight the scratching will stay behind the walls where it belongs. But you know better. Tomorrow, you'll wake to droppings by the grain sack, to holes chewed through the cloth you thought was tucked tight. And you'll start the conversation all over again. Traps laid by the hearth, prayers whispered to saints who never quite listen, jokes told at the market about the rats who share your bed like bad cousins who never move out. So for now, drift with these voices, these half-lies, half-hopes, these whispered bargains in the dark. They're part of your bedtime as much as the warmth of your sister's hand, your father's slow breathing, the hush that tries and fails to drown out the sound in the walls. Next, we'll creep away from these voices and peek behind the walls of the great houses, the stone keeps and velvet rooms where even the wealthy learned the scratching had no master. Because the rats didn't care how much gold you had tucked under your pillow. They wanted warmth, crumbs, and the shadows no candle could keep away. I'll be here, ready when you are. Next, come with me, just for a while, out of the cramped straw bed and into the chill corridors of stone keeps and manors perched on muddy hillsides. You might think we're leaving the scratching behind, stepping into a place where velvet curtains and tapestries stitched with saints keep the vermin away. But lean closer. Do you hear it? Listen. Even in these thick-walled chambers, the hush of wealth can't silence the scurrying. It's just softer here, muffled by the weight of velvet drapes, woven rush mats on cold flagstone. The furs spread over beds, so high you need a footstool to climb in. Picture it now. A lord's chamber at dusk, fire crackling in an iron grate, shadows dancing up the carved paneling that took 3 generations of craftsmen to perfect. The bed is wide enough for 2 or 3. A grand canopy draped with heavy cloth to keep the drafts at bay. Feather pillows, soft as down can be, pile up like clouds at the headboard. And tucked in beneath it all, the lord's lady pulls her fur cloak tighter around her shoulders, hoping the cold won't slip through tonight. But the cold always finds a way, and where the cold goes, the scratching follows. Imagine slipping behind one of those embroidered hangings, a tapestry showing St. George slaying the dragon, its edges twitching just a little as you lean closer. Behind it, the stones are rough, ancient. Gaps, cracks, little chasms that run between the walls like secret roads, highways for tiny paws. You see the flick of a tail, the glint of 2 bead-bright eyes. They wait until the lady's candle gutters low, until the servants' footsteps fade into distant corridors. And then they come, one after another, sniffing along the baseboards for a crumb fallen from a servant's tray, a sliver of cheese tucked carelessly into a linen napkin. Sometimes the rats go bold, bolder than in the cottages where a single stomp might scatter them. Here, they've learned that the noble folk don't rise from their feather beds to chase shadows. They slip onto the banquet tables long after the feast is cleared, licking grease from silver platters left for the servants to scrub at dawn. A sticky drop of wine, a smear of marrow along a bone. The scraps of a lord's supper are more than enough to feed a dozen bellies with fur and twitching whiskers. And what are the servants? They know the scratching well. Imagine them tiptoeing through the long gallery, candelabra in hand, the flame flickering every time a draft sighs through the corridor. They hear it behind the walls, under the floorboards, the same soft scurry they knew as children in their peasant beds, only now dressed up in stone and gold. Sometimes they gossip about it. In the kitchens at dawn, sleeves rolled up, knives scraping crusted fat from plates. Did you hear them in the Lord's chamber again? One scullery maid asks, her voice hushed but sly. Another answers, tossing a glance over her shoulder. Bold as bishops they are, got into the cheese in the pantry, left droppings on the marble floor. The lady near swooned when she saw. But what can they do? Cats roam the halls, sleek as shadows. Pets and pest control in equal measure. Yet even the Lord's pampered tomcat curls up in the kitchen hearth when the wind howls too cold. He'll flick an ear at the sound of claws in the ceiling beams. But move? Not tonight. Picture a banquet night. Platters heaped with roast fowl, haunches of venison, candied fruit, and sugared almonds tumbling across the table. The hall fills with laughter, the scrape of lutes, the clink of goblets. And beneath the dais, under the rushes that line the floor, you know they're there, the rats, feasting on drippings that slip through the cracks, picking at bones that roll out of reach. The great tapestries do nothing to keep them out. If anything, they're just cover for the trails they run under candlelight. And when the feast ends, when the hall grows still and the last song drifts up into the rafters, the scratching grows bolder. The lords and ladies dream of power, of intrigue and riches, but their dreams hum with the same tiny claws that crept across the peasants' beams. Nobility means nothing to a rat. A crumb is a crumb, whether it falls from a serf's crust or a nobleman's trencher. Tomorrow, a servant will find droppings near the spice chest. A cook will scold the scullery boy for leaving the pantry door ajar. The lady will shiver as she sits by the fire, insisting on more herbs stuffed behind the hangings, more sweet-smelling sachets to keep the scratching at bay. And the rats? They'll watch from their tunnels, soft-furred and clever, waiting for dusk to settle again. It's strange, isn't it? How the same scratching echoes through thatched hovels and stone keeps alike. An equalizer no gold can hush. A reminder that in the dark, the walls belong to the whiskered shadows. So rest your head on that imagined feather pillow for a moment. Feel how heavy the canopy drapes feel overhead. Listen to the hush, broken only by the faintest sound behind the panels. Tiny claws, a whisker twitching, a squeak no one will admit they hear. Next, we'll slip outside again, but not far, just enough to follow the stench that fed them all. The open drains, the piles of waste, the filth that made medieval streets a banquet for the scratching things we couldn't keep out. Ready? Stay close. We'll walk through the stench together, I promise. Next, let the hush of the Lord's chamber slip away, the velvet tapestries falling back into place behind you like a door closing on a dream you'd rather not keep. Now, breathe deep, or as deep as you dare, because out here, past the grand walls, past the crooked cottages, past the rutted lanes and church bells, there's a smell that never leaves you. Picture it now, a village at dawn, or maybe a bustling town at dusk. They're not so different when you measure them by the nose. The stench greets you long before the door swings open or the thatch roof leaks its secrets down your collar. It's a heavy, sour cloak that drapes over every stone and timber beam, stitched together by all the little human things that living people must do, and all the things they never quite buried deep enough. Step carefully. The street is more gutter than road, a shallow ditch running down the center, carrying away whatever a house can't keep inside. Wash water gone cloudy with lye. Pig's blood from the butcher's stall pooling thick and sticky near the drain. A soup of onion skins, cabbage leaves, spoiled milk, offal and bones, all drifting along like little boats to nowhere. And when the sun bakes it, as it will come morning, the smell thickens until it clings to your hair, your cloak, your very breath. You hear it before you see it, the rustle of small feet darting along the gutter's edge, pausing to nose at a strip of fat bobbing lazily in the slow trickle. The rats are bold here, bold and fat. They grow large on a diet that never runs out. Scraps fallen from carts, barrels tipped over after a drunken brawl, a child's half-eaten apple forgotten on a windowsill. No matter how many times the town decrees the streets must be swept, the people must keep their waste pits covered. The butcher must drain his blood away from the well. The stench lingers. Because life is messy, and no broom is ever enough to sweep away a whole village's worth of living. Imagine the trades that feed it. The tanner's yard behind a row of lean-tos, where piles of raw hides wait their turn to be scraped clean, reeking of flesh and salt and the sour bite of urine used to cure them. Down the lane, a dyer's vat bubbles with pungent potions, stale urine again, fermented lichen, crushed bark, all poured out when the cloth is done, seeping into the mud where rats wait to sniff at the bitter dregs. There's the butcher's stall, warm in the afternoon sun. Flies gather in clouds around hooks heavy with glistening cuts of meat, bright and pink while the sun's still up, but darkening by dusk. The scraps fall like blessings for anything with claws and a nose. The butcher's cat swats one rat aside, but another slips under the bench, tail whipping as it tugs a bloody rind into the shadows. And then there's the latrine pit, a wooden plank perched above a hole lined with stones that do little to hold back the seep of things you'd rather not think about. Waste slides down, merges with the gutter, joins the grand river of filth that feeds every burrow, every tunnel, every hidden nest where rats wait for night. It's not that no one cares. They do in their way. Mothers mutter as they fling buckets into the gutter. Boys sweep straw across the doorstep to soak up the worst puddles. The church preaches about purity while the ditch behind its walls bubbles on with yesterday's sins. But the stench is bigger than one sermon, one broom, one hopeful ordinance nailed to the door. And so the rats thrive. They follow the trails of offal and bone like breadcrumbs. They nest in the heaps of discarded straw and broken crates piled behind the tavern, in the dark gaps beneath the baker's oven, where the warmth is a promise against the frost. They slip into cellars where ale barrels drip sweet foam, into granaries where the spilled grain crunches under their feet like the world's easiest harvest. Imagine a rat, belly plump, nose twitching, perched on the edge of a drain pipe. It pauses, ears flicking, whiskers brushing the cold stone. It knows the path well, from the gutter to the pantry to the beams above the bed. It knows the stench by heart because it made the stench possible, one stolen crumb, one chewed sack, one warm burrow at a time. And the people know it too. They hold handkerchiefs to their noses as they pass the butcher's drain, sprinkle sweet herbs along their thresholds in a futile hope of tricking their senses. Lavender, rosemary, thyme. Little perfumes that float a moment, then drown in the river of filth that makes the scratching thrive. So breathe it in, just for a moment. The stench of life and death and waste and warmth, all bound together in a sour perfume that fed the scratching for centuries. In that smell lives every crumb that fell, every trap that failed, every whiskered belly that learned the street was the best banquet of all. Next, we'll slip under the street itself, into the hidden places you'd never dare peer into by daylight, the secret tunnels that crisscross beneath taverns and bakeries, where the scratching grows boldest and the shadows are thickest. Keep your cloak tight. The rats have been waiting for us there. I'll go first. Come when you're ready. Next, pull your cloak tighter. Mind your head on the low beams as we slip away from the rutted lane. Follow the trail of the stench, the trickle of waste that seeps between stones and timber, drips through the cracks in the cellar floors. Because under these muddy roads and crooked houses lies another village altogether, one you never see unless you're foolish enough to lift a rotting floorboard or peer down an open drain when the moon's hanging heavy overhead. Picture it, a warren of earthen tunnels, half dug by human hands, half carved out by nature's quiet persistence. Old waste pits caved in and forgotten, disused cesspools turned into passageways where warmth lingers long after the sun sets. Timber beams, rotting but sturdy enough to keep the walls from caving in on those who know how to scurry just right. In these tunnels, the scratching grows bolder. Up above, they slip between walls and under beams like thieves at a feast. But here, they are kings, plump bellies brushing the mud as they squeeze past each other, noses twitching at the promise of tomorrow's crumbs. You might hear them before you see them, a low, soft rustle that echoes strangely in these earthen halls. The faint drip of water from the gutter above forms shallow pools that shimmer in candlelight if someone dares venture down here with a lantern. But it's never people who come willingly, unless you're the rat catcher, boots caked in filth, muttering curses at the shadows he knows he can't clear away. Imagine crouching down, peering into the darkness. You see whiskers first, shining like tiny threads in the dim light. Then a twitch of fur, the gleam of black eyes that reflect the world above like pinpricks of oil. Here they are, mothers and pups, the sleek old king of the nest who survived a dozen traps. His coat patchy but his wits sharp. The air is thick down here, damp, sour, heavy with the scent of droppings and the warm, musky stink of fur pressed together in tight burrows. Straw, rags, scraps of cloth stolen from wash lines, all woven into soft nests hidden deep under the butcher's shop or the alehouse floor. You can almost picture them learning the rhythms of the world above. The rattle of the bread cart rolling over their tunnels, the muffled clatter of tankards dropped on a tavern floor, the distant toll of church bells that don't echo here but shiver through the beams like a warning. The braver ones know exactly when to rise, slipping up through the cracks just as dusk wraps the streets in shadow. A dozen tiny feet scamper over stone, tracing the scent trails that lead from the waste ditch to the pantry, from the tavern drain to the crumb-strewn corners under the straw beds. Meanwhile, deeper in the warren, the pups learn. They squeak and squirm in nests lined with stolen feathers, their mother's warm belly the only world they know, for now. They don't yet fear the broom, or the cat's claws, or the snap of a crude wooden trap. But they will. Oh, they will. And still, they'll come back. Imagine the people above, stepping over these tunnels every day. They think the scratching comes from the rafters, the shadows under the bed. They think they can sprinkle herbs at the threshold, clap a trap shut by the hearth, and keep the world clean that way. But the real kingdom lies underfoot, a secret city that hums with life too small and quick to ever be banished for long. Sometimes, in the hush of midnight, a floorboard creaks. A crumb tumbles through the crack. Down here, that crumb is gold, a promise that the tunnel will stay warm, the nest will stay full. And when the frost comes, freezing the gutters to glass, these burrows stay just warm enough. The press of bodies a soft, breathing blanket that no winter wind can slip through. And the rats? They don't hate us for the traps, the cats, the stones thrown at shadows. They accept it, part of the game, the ancient pact. Leave a crumb, lose a crumb. Feed the scratching under your feet, because the scratching keeps the filth moving, the warmth alive, the endless tide of life that makes a burrow in the dark and never, ever really dies. So stand here a moment longer. Feel the cold floor under your boots. Listen for that faint rustle, the soft squeak that sounds like the world whispering its oldest secret. You may live above, but we live below. Next, we'll come back up, slow and careful, and linger at the hearth once more, where families traded old stories about these tunnels, legends spun to comfort children who feared the scratching, or to remind grown folk that some visitors never left, no matter how tightly you barred the door. Stay close. I'll help you lift the floorboard when you're ready. Next, climb up from the tunnels with me now. Up through the cracked floorboards, your shoulders brushing the rough beams, your head breaking through into the soft glow of a hearth fire, fighting off the chill that seeps through every stone. You stamp your feet on the packed earth floor, trying to shake off the memory of damp fur and the echo of tiny squeaks that cling to your thoughts like burrs on your cloak. Here, in the circle of light, the scratching is just an echo behind the walls, nothing more than a rumor you can tame with words. This is the place where stories live, where children gather close, their feet tucked under threadbare blankets, eyes wide and sleepy, half wanting to be afraid and half wanting to believe that fear can be chased away with a good tale. Picture a family like so many others. The mother sits closest to the hearth, mending a tunic torn on a fence post. Her needle clicks in and out of the cloth, her voice warm and low. A father leans back on his stool, boots off, toes stretching toward the embers. The children huddle together on a pile of old rushes, knees pulled tight to chests. The scratch of straw at their ankles a small reminder that the world beyond the firelight is never truly empty. Outside, the wind moans through the shutters. Overhead, the beams pop as they settle into the night's frost. And beneath it all, a quiet sound they all pretend not to hear. Claws testing the corners, a tail flicking across a beam, a gentle scuffle in the pantry where a scrap of bread waits to be found. That's when the stories come. Old words passed down like a heart's warmth. Tales spun from fear and faith and the need to make the scratching feel smaller than it is. Did you know, the mother says, not looking up from her needle, that long ago there was a rat so big its whiskers brushed the roof beams like the branches of an old oak? The children gasp, eyes round in the fire's flicker. She nods, lips curling into the smallest smile. They say it lived under the church, feasting on candle drippings and the crumbs left by priests too fat to bend and sweep. No trap could catch it, no cat could chase it. It was clever, cleverer than any man. And if you saw its tail slip around a corner, you'd best keep your toes tucked in under your blanket that night. The father chuckles softly, though he glances at the pantry door when he thinks no one's looking. He clears his throat, adds his own piece to the tale. But you know what else they say? They say Saint Gertrude, the one who watches over cats and those who tend the hearth. She once made a bargain with that great rat. Promised him a kingdom beneath the floorboards, so long as he kept his children from growing too bold. That's why they only steal crumbs, see? They could take our fingers if they liked, but the old bargain keeps them in line. The youngest child shivers in her sister's arms, clutching a rag doll patched with scraps. She peeks over the edge of her blanket, voice so small it barely reaches the fire. But what if the bargain breaks? Silence. A log pops in the hearth. Somewhere behind the walls, the scratching pauses, almost like it's listening. The mother sets down her needle, brushing the hair from the girl's forehead. Then we make another bargain. Love. We sweep the crumbs for them. We toss out scraps to the ditch. We keep the cat fat and happy. We share a little, and they leave us a little. It's always been that way. And that's the heart of these legends. Really, a way to shape the fear into something human, something with rules. Stories that let you believe you could tame the rustle in the beams with an offering of crusts and a whispered prayer. A pact written not in ink, but in the soft sighs of sleepers who trust that what scurries in the dark wants only what they can spare. If you listen closer, you'll hear other tales, too. The grandmother who swore a rat once spoke to her when she was a girl, its voice scratchy as dry straw, promising to watch over her children if she left a bowl of porridge by the hearth each feast day. Or the black cat with eyes like holes that slipped from house to house, chasing away the boldest rats for families who left a bit of lard in the yard each night. These stories swirl together with the smoke that curls up the chimney, half wish, half warning. They make the scratching seem smaller, almost friendly in the hush before sleep. After all, what's a rat but another hungry soul, tucked under the same roof, needing warmth and a bite to eat? So you tuck your toes tight under the blanket. You listen for the scratching in the walls, and you tell yourself the bargain will hold. If you're careful, if you sweep the hearth clean, if you let the stories live long enough to keep the fear from growing teeth. Next, we'll let the legends settle and drift into the final hush, the soft hours before dawn, when the scratching fades and the world goes quiet, and sleep finally wraps around you like the last warm blanket you have. We're almost there. I'll stay right here, so the scratching never feels quite so close when you close your eyes. Next, feel it now. The hush that settles when the fire dies all the way down, when the last ember gives up its glow and the chill edges in to test the gaps around the door. The stories by the hearth fade, slipping into the thick hush of shared breathing and the slow rhythm of sleep. Outside, the village rests under a heavy blanket of night. The gutters frozen in places, the thatch roofs weeping drops of water where the frost finds its way inside. Somewhere in the shadows, the rats pull back into their tunnels, bellies full from a night of stolen crumbs. They curl into their burrows beneath the tavern, under the bakery's warm oven stones, behind the beams in the Lord's chamber where velvet can't quite reach. Their tiny bodies press close, nose to flank, tail to paw, wrapped in the same ancient instinct that drives you under your scratchy blanket. Find warmth, find safety, survive until morning. Picture the peasant home now, your little patch of straw pressed nearly flat from all the restless turning through the night. Your brother's knee is hooked behind yours, an anchor that keeps you from rolling into the draft that sneaks up through the cracks in the floor. Your mother's back is a warm wall on your other side, rising and falling in that slow, familiar pattern you've known since your first cry in this world. Somewhere close, the village cat lifts her head. Her ears twitch, eyes slitted open to catch the faintest sound of claws that might dare one last venture across the beams. But the scratching has mostly faded for now. The little thieves are satisfied for tonight. They've found their fill. The heel of stale bread, the smear of grease on the edge of the pot, the scattering of barley left behind when your father dozed off mid-supper. They've slipped back behind the walls to sleep in nests lined with scraps stolen from your own rag bag. This is the moment when the fear loosens its grip just a little. The dark still hums with secrets you'll never see, but your mind drifts past the itch beneath the straw, past the tickle of fleas that burrow into the seams of your tunic. Even the itch feels softer now, an old companion whose bite is gentler when sleep wraps around your bones. Outside, the lanes hold their breath. The stench of the gutter is dulled by the cold, frozen into something you can almost pretend isn't there. No footfalls yet, no clatter of buckets, no creak of cart wheels over ruts. Just the distant hush of the wind testing shutters, rattling the church bell ever so slightly. A low, hollow note that says, almost morning, but not yet. You think, half dreaming, about the stories your mother spun by the hearth, the great rat under the church, the bargain with St. Gertrude. You picture the tunnels below, furred bodies pressed together, tails curled in a soft knot, each tiny heartbeat echoing under the stones. You wonder if they dream, too, of warmth, of a kitchen where no broom ever comes, of a world where the scraps never run dry. And isn't that the strange truth you feel in this last quiet before dawn? For all the scratching, the squeaking, the stolen crusts, and the plague, and the itch that keeps you awake, you and they share the same thin line of warmth against the cold. The same hunger, the same need to curl into something living when the wind rattles the walls and the frost creeps under the door. So you burrow deeper. You listen for the scratching, but hear only the breathing. Your brother's, your mother's, yours. The hush between you all is softer than straw, thicker than any blanket you've ever owned. You tell yourself the scratching is gone for now, pushed back into the walls, deep into the burrows where it will wait for tomorrow night to come again. Your eyes drift shut. Your mind drifts too, carried on the warmth of all those who lay here beside you. The family you chose, the family you never invited, the whiskered shadows who've slept just beyond your reach since the first roof was thatched over mud and straw. Outside, the first crack of dawn hovers just beyond the horizon. The rooster clears its throat, not ready yet. The rat catcher shifts in his borrowed bed across the village, dreaming of the next trap he'll set. The merchant's cat stretches near the hearth, whiskers twitching, already half hunting in her sleep. And you breathe in the last of the night. You hold it close, this strange, scratchy piece. Because for all its filth and fear and soft bites in the dark, it is yours, this burrow, this bed, this hush before the sun rises and the scratching begins again. Sleep now. Let the beams be quiet, the straw still. The scratching will return when dusk falls once more, but that is tomorrow's trouble. For now, in this tiny kingdom of warmth and stories and rustling whiskers, you are safe enough. Good night, little dreamer. The scratching waits, but so does the dawn, and you'll greet them both, side by side, as you always have.